Ask the Podcast Coach for May 16th, 2015. I love live. Oh, no. I'm just going to do it again.
Just do it again. Yeah.
Ask the podcast. Quiet on the set. Ask the Podcast Coach for May 16th, 2015.
Let's get ready to podcast.
Oh, yeah. It's nice to be back in the chair. Welcome to Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I am Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com. After spending a week on assignment, glad to be back in the chair. Thanks to the one and only, the masterful, the wizard of podcasting. How's that one? I'm trying to think of something new.
Wow. You better be careful. You're making me sound a little too impressive.
Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, buddy, how's it going?
It's good. Thanks for having me back on. Always good Saturday mornings to get together and answer your questions live. Enjoyed doing it. Kind of running the. We'll talk a little bit maybe in the show a little bit later. I used a whole different set of technology to run Ask the Podcast Coach last week, and just a lot of fun to kind of be the host and bring you in remote on assignment. Yeah. That was fun too. So it was a good show.
I was about ready to fire up the laptop again.
We should say thanks to Mike Howard for coming out and being a part of. He's in the chat room today, and he's a great guest to have on, a great guest host. He's got a great podcast, and so if you're interested in what Mike does, head over to JPEG to Raw, JPEG, the number 2 Raw, RAW.com.
And our apologies for being slightly tardy today. This will be the last week we have to say this. If you're a regular listener to the show, you know Dave's computer is just whacked, basically. And it's a little weird. And tried Google Chrome, couldn't get the broadcast. I have something wrong where there's just something whacked. I need to whack this machine and just reload the software. And the good news is sitting right behind me is a brand new Dell. But I have I talked about number one priorities a couple weeks ago. And my number one priority right now is getting the virtual ticket to the New Media Expo finished. And so I just got up this morning and was just hammering through those things. It sounds like it wouldn't be that hard. It's just cutting and pasting the sessions. But I'm amazed, that we went around and hit start at the beginning of the day and just let them go. And there's a lot of people that didn't get introduced. You were supposed to get introduced. And if you didn't get introduced, I don't know, here's a novel idea. Maybe introduce yourself. So I have to listen to an episode or a session and figure out who this is. So I can then tag that it's so-and-so and so-and-so. I just listened to one that I was like, really? That it was a blogger, and the presenter decided that apparently it was a smaller group. So she went off the stage and talked down amongst them, about, I don't know, probably 10 to 12 feet away from a microphone.
I'd like to get closer to the audience.
Yeah, but... and I was like, okay, I get the sentiment, understand the sentiment. I'm like, that's not going to make for a very good recording.
No, that doesn't.
So that was kind of interesting.
Get on the microphone. I don't care how much you don't like microphones. If you're going to go to a conference and speak, grab the microphone, right? There's lots of things going on there, like the recording that you need to know. It's just one of those things. I get it. We do this all the time with people in public, and you hand them a microphone and like, oh no, I don't want to. I'm like, no. There's callers listening. We'll have people calling in on a conference call. There's callers listening. You need to, we're not trying to make your voice big. We're just trying to make it so people can hear you. So grab the microphone.
Yeah. So, and just little things like, in some cases, and it's easy to forget to do this, but as the speaker, if somebody doesn't go to the microphone, to repeat the question so that it hits the, so you hear this, right, and then they answer it, and you're like, what was the question? So it's fun cleaning that up. Yeah, it's just taking longer than a lot longer than expected, and I've got a meeting today with Rick Calvert from New Media Expo, and I'm sure that's going to be his question. Is like, where the heck are the files? So, because the silly me, I got back from New Media Expo and was kind of like, and then I got sick. So I should have just kept on rolling, and then I've been traveling all over the place. In fact, if you're in Michigan, next week I will be in Troy, Michigan, and Ryan Parker and I are looking to have maybe a little meetup.
Oh, good.
If you're in that area, we haven't picked a spot yet, but if you go to facebook.com/School of Podcasting, you can see that. Also, Jim, I should let you know, I have no chat today. I'm going chatless.
Oh, you're going. All right. I'll
So
represent the chat room.
Yeah, you got to represent the chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was fun. It was weird being being not on the show. 10:30 rolled around, and I was like, all right. And I was listening to Dustin Hartzler and learned some good stuff. I definitely know it's on the list, like priority number 15. Get to know more about Facebook ads, because it looks like a really, if you've got a little bit of budget to spend, you can get insanely targeted on promoting your show that way. Or in my case, promoting the School of Podcasting and things like that. Yeah. So it might be something I look into. We probably should mention
Twitter ads as well. Yeah. How do people call in again?
What's that number is 347-850-8007. Again, 347-850-8007. And we have open phone lines, of course. And I was laughing because I got to hear last week's episode. It's not posted yet, but I was laughing because you hit the wrong button. I'm like, yes!
Well, it wasn't a matter of not hitting the right button. It was a matter of not hitting the button after stopping I had them all queued up in a loop, and so yeah, it's fun. I don't use sound effects on my shows ever. I mean, that's just something I've never gotten into, and so last week I ran with yours, and it's kind of fun. I'll have to admit it was fun to do that. During the program last week, Mike Howard's PC that he was using smoked his power supply. I mean, it just right in the middle of the show, woof, it went, and away he went. And I lost him for 2 minutes, so I just kept talking. I'm like, well, I don't know really what's going on. We'll just kind of keep going. And he, fortunately, another good reason if you're going to do live podcasting to have a second PC handy is he was able to fire up the second one, join the Hangout, get in. It wasn't, the different camera angle, some different things, but he was able to quickly join back in. So little one, when you're podcasting live and things go wrong, just roll with it, right? It just, things lock up, things happen. It's not a big deal. You just keep rolling. Two, it's always nice to have some extra equipment around, kind of as a backup. I dropped a whole glass of water on my Alesis Multimix 8, and just, it's done, right? I tried using it one time. I get all kinds of crackles. Mixers and water don't get along, and I need sippy cup lids on everything I drink down here. But, so for the show, we ran it off an audio box USB, a PreSonus audio box, those $99 USB interface. And they actually Voicemeeter. They have a little application called Voicemeter. I don't know if you've ever used that before, but it is a virtual mixer that works with the audio box, not audio vox. That's those two. This is B with a B, AUDIOBOX from PreSonus. And Voicemeter plugs right in, and you install a virtual audio cable that they provide for you. No charge for any of this beyond buying the box. And I was actually able to do a virtual mix minus to bring that music in on this PC and run it out through the Hangout. So while I like it, I get a little crackling sound on it. The PC doesn't handle it really well. And so I'm not going to keep it long term. I've got a Mackie Pro FX 8 coming to replace the Alesis. And so I'll go back. I like to turn knobs and dials and stuff like that. That's just my preference. But so we ran the show off the audio box last week. It looks like we have a caller.
I was going to say, and it's only appropriate that here again, we're testing things out on the air. That's what we do here.
Oh yeah, it's the first time I did it. I just was like, well, Mike Howard helped me test it, so we tested it Friday night, and so we spent hours testing it. But yeah, brand new solution right on the air.
Awesome. Well, ending in 159. You're on with Dave and Jim. What's your name and what's your question? That would be you. Ending in 3159. Maybe I messed it up, only giving them 3 numbers. You're on with Dave and Jim. I did test this earlier. Remember, I always have to jiggle the cord. I'm jiggling the cord.
Sometimes they're muted. Maybe they've muted themselves. That happens. Check your mute if you're calling in through Skype.
So let me
keep talking. We can't hear you. Maybe Dave's got you muted somewhere or turned down. Just keep talking. Hey, are we there? Are you there yet? Are we there yet?
Is the caller there? I'm going to hit a button here just for giggles.
Okay.
To make sure we are getting
audio. While you're setting that up, I ran the Blog Talk Radio interface here and just dialed in with your account last week and found it, man, really, really easy to use.
Isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, it's dynamite. So a couple of people had asked how much. It's $40 right now if you want to use that. And it's a little pricey for just a phone interface from that standpoint, but super easy to use. Again, I use that kind of a virtual cable to create a mix minus.
Okay. So I hear that.
All right, so music's working.
How about now?
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh,
Now,
there we go.
who knows?
Hey, Jim and Dave.
How are you?
Good. This is John Morgan.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
Real good. Other than you made me cry the other day. I'm walking around out by one of my customers' pools. Thank God nobody was there. Listening to the School of Podcasting, and just tears streaming. I was like, that asshole Dave.
You are not the first. It's really weird because what John's talking about is last Sunday, I silly me, I recorded, instead of recording on Saturday, I recorded on Sunday. And my mom's been gone a long time. It's a weird stat. I've been alive more without my mom than I have with her because she died when I was 24. And so in a really quick nutshell, my mom said I was neat, basically. And I said, well, this is why you should podcast, because you're neat. But in the process, really put some production value into it. And at the end of that, I'm like going, this sounds like such a downer of an episode. And, it was a way, again, I always try to, if I'm going to use a personal story, it's to how does this tie into podcasting, not just what I had for breakfast. And I've had more people give me like, that was amazing. That was just a lot of feedback on this episode. And they said, yeah, I've heard that a lot. Dave, usually you make me laugh. I was crying my eyes out. So my apologies for making everybody cry.
I've got another topic.
All right.
Mike Dell did a show, and he was talking about these mastermind guys.
Yes.
And I thought that was really gutsy. I know the guys that like to do podcasts about podcasting like to do that cooperation, they call it.
Yeah.
But I think you guys should really choose your associates wisely.
Okay.
I don't think these guys should be held up as shining examples.
Well, like, what was so gutsy about what Mike said? I'm not sure I follow.
Well, he called the guys out.
Well, he just said, I don't like masterminds. I don't think I should have to pay for something. And there are, and he brought up Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey has whatever it is, the Golden Eagles or something like that, him and Dan Miller. And they just get together to help each other. And that was kind of Mike's point that, like, you know what, why don't you just get some, Jim and I always talk about getting a Skype buddy and a Hangout buddy and just get somebody to, like he does with Mike Howard, just somebody to test stuff with. And if you get a bunch of people doing that, congratulations, you have a mastermind. There's really not much to them.
Right. Yeah, but the guys who are taking advantage of the new guys trying to learn how to podcast.
Oh yeah.
It's shameful.
Yeah, I had 2 calls this weekend. People called in wanting to start a podcast, and it was just amazing. And it's kind of where we are right now because podcasting is getting so hot. People do research, and they're finding research from years ago that's really outdated. And one person says FeedBurner, 3 other people say don't use FeedBurner. Somebody will say you need to spend $1,000 on a microphone. Then you got a bunch of people saying, nah, just spend about $60. And it's hard to say, well, who's right? And it's kind of like, well, the answer is depends in some ways of what you're doing. But yeah, I talked to this woman yesterday and she was just gung ho about it. And she wants to start a live podcast. And, and I was like, well, slow down a bit. And she was just throwing out stuff like, well, I want to upload my RSS I need to upload my RSS to the Podbean so I can put it through FeedBurner, and then the iTunes tag will, and she just, and I'm like, hold on. I said, it's cool that you've done all this research, but you need a little guidance here. I'm like, cause it's cool that you've done this research, but it's really easy to just get lost in jargon. And then, then you've got, so many people, and I swear I'm going to start saying this on every podcast. You do not have only 8 weeks to be in new and noteworthy. It's new or noteworthy. But I believe, and I'm a John Lee Dumas fan. I believe it's in his book, Podcast Launch, that he says you only have 8 weeks. I think that's where that's coming from, but that's not true. That's absolutely, it might have been that way at one point. It's definitely not now. But yeah, it's kind of weird to, it drives me nuts. there's another new podcast about podcasting that has said you only have 8 weeks to be in new and noteworthy. And I politely contacted them behind the scenes and said, hey, just for the record, that's not true. And I've heard a lot of people say, have you heard this podcast? They're promoting the 8-week myth. And I'm like, yeah, what are you going to do? I mean, I guess the good news about that, there's really no harm in that. You're not going to have somebody go, oh, crap. I did all this stuff. But there are people that really get hung up on the launch.
I was thinking that there's going to be the guys that are on the side of ethics and morals, and there's going to be the other guys. I mean, you look at what the guys at Blueberry are doing. Todd over there and Mike, and I think they're calling these guys out, and I think it needs to be done.
Well, yeah, it's go to go to ClickBank, go to go to any place that sells digital content and type in podcasting. Go to Amazon and see how many people have written books on podcasting. And it's a free world. Go right ahead. My favorite was, for a while, I'd have to go back and look, but at davidjackson.org, I'd written a blog post about a guy that was throwing out his podcast shingle. The guy didn't have a podcast. He came from radio. And I understand that there's similarities to using a microphone and your show and things like that. You can definitely learn from a podcaster or from a radio guy. But on the other hand, I'm not going to hire a jockey who's never ridden a horse before. I'm like, come on now, are you going to tell me about an RSS feed when you don't know what it is? So yeah, it's going to get worse before it gets better, and a lot of people are going to get burned. I had somebody yesterday, they were really worried about, putting down the money for the School of Podcasting. And I said, hey, for the record, I said, short of free, I've been told that I'm the Walmart of podcasting because I'm inexpensive. I said, well, I like to help people more than profit from them. I said, now I do have 2 kids in college. I want to make a little money. I said, but feel free, to go, I said, Cliff Ravenscraft's a friend of mine. He's going to charge you almost, $2 or $3 grand now for his show, for his A to Z course. I said, Podcaster's Paradise is closed. Why? Because when he's going to open it, he's going to raise the price. That's classic marketing. It's called, number one, he built in, what's the thing where there's a sense of, he built in a sense of urgency. Got to get in now before we close the doors. And then they're going to revamp it. And because they revamped it, they can say, hey, it's new and improved. And now it's more money, which is fine. If you can get the money, by all means, go for it. But a lot of people are going to, and they're also going for a different market. A lot of those people are going for businesses, which I'll help you with your business as well. But it's interesting. I've done that. The thing I think I'm going to do in the future that's a little different is when I saw the whole Audello thing and I was like, oh, this is just wrong. I think in the future, I'm going to contact those people. In the past, I've said things about Podbean, and now that I've actually have a conversation with those guys, I still don't quite understand the whole putting people on their front page that's not on their show, but they're trying to build a directory. Well, that's the same thing Blueberry's doing, and I don't have a problem with Blueberry, so why should I have a problem with Podbean? And I think in the future, if I have a problem with somebody, if I don't understand why they're doing something, I think in the future I'm going to reach out to them and say, let's have a conversation. Why is that? And then if I really disagree with them and think this is a bad idea, then I'll talk to my audience and say, here's a new tool. Here's why I don't think it would work. Or here's something you might want to, here's a consequence that you may not be aware of if you use this, as opposed to just running around screaming the sky is falling. Try to do it a little more as a reporter than as, a lot of times I operate on emotion. I'll see something and be like, oh, this is crap. And that is not the time to fire up the microphone or the camera.
Well, I agree with you. I think that you're doing a better job than most.
Well, I appreciate that, my friend. So what else? What other questions?
You're not loading people up with $2,500 worth of equipment before they even find out if they like it.
Well, it's weird because, and people will misunderstand you. I mean, in my book, More Podcast Money, I say, I'm not doing this full time. I'm not. I do this basically 3 days a week, maybe 4, and so when I used to post my income reports and people would just look at the number and go, well, this guy's not successful. And they're thinking I'm working part-time, making $1,200 a month. And I'm like, I'm only working 3 days a week. I'm like, I think that's pretty good, and it's so, a lot of people judge success by money. And so I've seen some people at Amazon have said, this guy's not successful. because he's not making enough money. I'm like, you obviously didn't read the book. The book says this is not about making a living from podcasting. It's the fact that what inspired the book is so many people told me, I'm waiting for a sponsor. And I'm like, there's so many other ways to benefit from a podcast than waiting for a sponsor. Because, and when I update the book, I'll state from Rob Walsh at Libsyn, only 8% of podcasters have enough downloads to actually get a national sponsor. Now, local sponsor, if you want to get your own, you could probably do that. But, to say, well, you're only successful if you get a sponsor, you're either you were probably either the first podcaster in your genre or the best podcaster in your genre, and that's tough. You're talking treasure hunting, right? And you're metal detecting. Not everybody's into that. So you may never have 5,000 downloads because that's a super niche, but you might be able to get a sponsor from somebody that makes metal detectors or something like that. And there are all sorts of other ways to benefit from that. Yeah, that's part of the fun of putting your information
I think
out.
A lot of guys are not even interested in making money, and a lot of them are enjoy the hobby. But if they end up doing it long enough, maybe 10 years or something, like the guys at Zen and the Art of Triathlon, he just uses an iPhone to record. And he's been at it for 10 years, and he's making money now. And it's just, but he didn't do it originally to make money.
Right, exactly. I mean, if somebody buys one of those radio-controlled electric cars, those are not cheap. You're looking at hundreds of dollars, and I don't see people, when you see them in the parking lot driving their car, nobody walks up to them and goes, so how much money are you making with that car? It's a hobby, and that's perfectly fine to, just kick back and have fun. And I had an email from somebody this week who does a show about being a swinger. And when I mean swinger, I mean, that kind of swinging. And I said, wow, this is really interesting. And he's like, well, I thought you'd be a prude. I'm like, well, no. I said, but like, did your audience because I would think that would be kind of a community that may not wear a t-shirt that says, I like to swing. And I said, I would think you would kind of, find like-minded people. And he goes, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, that's cool, man. I'm like, that's just another classic example of that. So, there are going to be those people that want to do it as a hobby, and there are going to be those people that, want to do it for their business. There's all sorts of different reasons to start a podcast. I think the thing that we have to realize that, in the end, we all want to make good content. And, some of my shows I do just for fun, and other shows I do to promote a business. And I don't think you're stupid if you don't want to make money. And I don't think you're evil if you do. So it's kind of, we all have different motives for turning on the mic.
Well, I appreciate your philosophy on business.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. How's your podcast going?
Oh, I haven't had time to, right now I'm doing book work as we speak. I haven't had time to do anything fun for months now. That's always fun. I've been buried.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. But I do enjoy listening all day.
Well, there you go. Well, awesome.
Thanks for calling in, John.
Thanks for calling in, John. You have a good weekend.
All right.
Take care.
All right. Bye.
I think Dave, John's got a point. I did listen to Mike's podcast, and he does use a name specifically when he's talking about these masterminds, and kind of feels like they're being charged for. And you know what, you can do that if you want. If people will pay for it, I don't know if there's anything morally wrong with it.
Right.
This was Mike's opinion, and he was very clear to state that he just doesn't like it, and he can do that if it's. I think the point is it's all in the name, right? So if you're going to do that and you're going to charge for it, that's more like coaching probably than it is like a mastermind. But really, at the end of the day, I don't know if it matters that much. I mean, it's just a name at the end of the day. And if people are willing to pay you or me or whoever to spend an hour or two, right, then they will, right? It's supply and demand. At that point, if I have so many people contacting me, this is why I don't really charge, because I don't have so many people contacting me that it takes up so much of my time. But if I had 50 people lined up, guess how you slow down the flow? Yeah. You charge money, right? that's kind of why you do those things. That's why contractors bid ridiculous amounts of money for some jobs and not for others, because they don't want to do the work. And if they offer them that kind of stupid money, well, then you do the work for that kind of stupid money. So it's just one of those kinds of things. So I thought it was a good bold move on Mike's point. At the end of the day, is charging for it? Well, you gotta come to your own conclusion on that thing. But I thought it was a really good topic.
Yeah, I went over and looked at. Should we just say the person's name? I don't think he cares.
If you want to, it's your show.
He mentioned Paul Culligan, who's a friend of mine, and I went over and looked at Paul's stuff, and he's not. It's not like he's getting you into a group and going, gotcha. Guess what? I need $99 a month. It says right here, $99 a month. Here's what you're gonna get. So, if he can get it, by all means, have fun with that. And
and Mike's very clear in his podcast. This is my opinion, and I don't like it. And that's fine, right? You can. That's with your own podcast. You can say that, and that's great. I think that's a fine position to have. So it's one of those kinds of things. Especially, and this is such a niche conversation for us podcasters, right? It's such a tight, small group that we're talking about here. But anyway, so interesting conversation.
Hey, can you help me out? Because normally I would look in the chat. Dan, I cannot remember his last name. I can see his avatar. It's got a little beard, a mustache, and a guy with a hat.
Yeah. I don't see him.
Anyway, no. He's a member of the School of Podcasting, and it was really cool because he's using Joyride. That's the one that's like a Patreon kind of type system. And to make a long story short, in our little, I call them office hours. It's basically a little meetup that we did. He pointed out that we could not find any way to get paid in Joyride. He actually had contributors, and he again has a super niche kind of show. And he's like, I got 50 some bucks or whatever it was he goes, I just can't figure out how to get it into my wallet, And so it was interesting because I reached out to Jeff Chang from Joyride. I'd actually interviewed him on the show. And I said, we have some people saying they can't get paid. And he's like, well, that's, baloney, whatever. And I said, well, here's what we're doing. And, tell me where the button is. And basically, in the past, you would email them and say, here's my PayPal email. Well, now it's actually in the dashboard. So it's kind of cool. We actually helped to point out something that, they were maybe a little too close to the trees to realize that, hey, we missed that. And so if you're using Joyride, you'll now see a button in the upper right-hand corner. You can click on that and say, I want a check, I want this, or I want PayPal. And so it was kind of fun that we got to do that. So that was some news. And speaking of that, and speaking of Podbean, I just was playing with it this morning, now has, and it's weird because it's Podbean, but it's not Podbean. They've obviously whitelisted something, some sort of crowdfunding, where again, you can say, if I make X amount of money a month, I will do this, or I won't, I'll take ads out, or I will, whatever kind of thing. It's basically the Patreon, which is kind of weird that, Patreon is now like Kleenex. Right, everyone that comes after them now is going to be like, yeah, it's kind of a Patreon thing. So Podbean has now adjusted that. Now the interesting thing is, it's always fun when people launch new products. So again, here's where I've reached out to them. You would think when you're talking about people's money, you think there would be details on like how much they get, how much you get, and I can't find any. And I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. So I sent an email to them and said, hey, congratulations on launching this crowdfunding thing. Where's the details? So I will, which is kind of good because I want to see what their support's like. I've used it in the past, but I've been playing with Podbean, and so this will be a nice little test to see how their support is. And it just may be a case where they're, again, they may have launched something just a little too soon and forgot to cross that T and dot that I, that maybe people are going to want to know before I go asking people to, support the show and raise money, that, hey, guess what? Podbean gets, 20% or something. And I'm just making that up as a worst case scenario, but we don't know at this point.
Dave, as a pure host provider, how many of your rules do they comply with?
That's the thing.
Talk about that.
I have to actually talk about them now because they, they don't change my name. They don't change my file name. They don't change the ID3 tag. They give me stats. They offer support, and there's a redirect. Now, what's weird is the redirect is not in the dashboard. You have to go to they have like forums and a decent ticketing system. And when you type in redirect, here it is. And you can, if you're logged in and you go to that redirect, you can put in your, my RSS is going to be over there, and they will actually redirect it. So I was like, well, that's all of them. And then I asked,
direct MP3.
So say what?
I can get a file. I can get my file name off their servers, direct MP3.
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but you can do that. They like you to put their player on it, which is fine. Right. If you use like Podbean's websites, they're not completely ugly. Now, here again, this is how they make money. They always want you to upgrade. It's kind of annoying that every time you log in, you will click on something and like, oh, you don't have access to this. Because right now I'm doing the $10 a month plan. And even with that, I get all the stats and things like that. But there are some things that I don't get. But it is kind of annoying that every time I turn around, there's I wish they would like hide the things I don't want. But on the other hand, that's not good marketing. They want to show me what I'm not getting. And, but yeah, you can go in and look at the episodes and you get a link. It's not, Libsyn is probably the easiest on that. Of course, Blueberry, you don't have to do that. If you're using PowerPress, you can just upload right from within WordPress. But SoundCloud is the worst in terms of getting a direct link to the MP3. It's an interesting interface. I'm still kind of kicking the tires on it and things like that. I'm going to use it. I'm in the midst of launching a new show based on Clamor. And just because I haven't launched a new show in a while, and I'm kind of using that on the School of Podcasting. I've already tweaked it a bunch since I put out one episode, let a bunch of people listen to it, and they went, liked it, hated this, hated that, more of this, that's good, do that. And so episode 2 is going to be way different than episode 1. None of these are public at this point, unless you ask me and I'll tell you where you can hear it. But that's kind of cool because I can look at the stats in Podbean to see what kind of stats I'm getting. It'll be interesting. And it was a simple equation. I only have so much time. I don't have a whole lot of time to make another show. And originally it was going to be a top 50 countdown, and it took X amount of time to make a show. Well, that's too much time. So here's an easy solution: make it a top 20, and maybe even a top 10. I
would think 10 would be good enough.
Yeah,
from a Clamor.
Well, because the thing that people liked about it is I know this is shocking, snarky remarks about some of them, because they're like, there's some rappers there, and I'm just so not a rapper, and so it's kind of funny listening. I mean, I always say Casper looks at me and goes, "Man, you're white," and so me adding remarks and jokes like this is more of that, insert more of you into this, because that's funny and entertaining. Well, that means I've got to listen to the clamors. I've got to come up with something witty and funny, and that's just going to take more time. And I'm like, well, if I'm doing that, I cannot do that because some of them are just, again, I'm not the target audience for the little snippet, but we'll see. It's one of those things where I'm still testing it, and I'm going to do a couple more episodes and decide, okay, I actually am, kind of like we did with this show, right? This show started off as a test, and then we kind of went, right, let's keep doing it. So we'll see. But we should mention we do have open phone lines if you'd like to call on in. That number is 347-850-8007. And again, 347-850-8007. And
can I throw something in kind of cool this week?
I did. Cool. Go ahead.
We skipped a little bit there. So when you think about advertising, you're talking about Facebook advertising a ways back, but recently I was at a tech conference and I ran into the general manager of basically an online news site called Silicon Prairie News. And they are kind of a Midwest. They cover Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas, a little bit of Missouri down there. Those four. Did I say Iowa in there? And they cover the tech industry here. We kind of, this middle Midwest here has a thriving tech industry that between Omaha and Des Moines and Kansas City and we've got a lot of stuff going on. And so Silicon Prairie News. So I met the general manager. We were talking. I shared my podcast with him, and he's actually going to come on the podcast as a guest here in the next 4 or 5 weeks. But he approached me. He's like, "Hey, can I run an ad for your free podcast in the paper?" And I'm like, yeah. And I said, I'm not really good at graphics. And he goes, well, we got one of those guys. And within a day, he sent me a he sent me a banner that they'd put together, and I said, yeah, and he ran it. And so it just came out the other day. So if you go to siliconprairienews.com, scroll down a little bit, it's below below the fold, but you scroll down, there's for the average guy.tv, Cyber Frontiers is being kind of featured, and I just thought that was a cool. I didn't pay him, he's not paying me. It was just kind of a fun sharing exercise. But you never know who you're going to run into at these when you go to these conferences and stuff, and the kind of conversations you can strike up. And so it's kind of fun. I don't know. I'll track the numbers to see. Again, have him on the podcast. It's definitely a local thing, and it's kind of my gig here in the Midwest of having tech and being local and some of those kinds of things. So just don't underestimate the relationships that you make, and oftentimes these kinds of things can be swapped.
Well, and one of the things you want to do in your local paper is, look if there's a person who constantly has the tech beat, or if you're doing a show about NASCAR or knitting or whatever it is, treasure hunting, who would be reporting that, and just follow them on Twitter, and then every now and then, hey, I really liked your article on so and so, and just ever so politely, just every time they turn around, oh, there's that Dave Jackson guy again. Oh, and then as opposed to, hi, I'm Dave Jackson, you should write a story about me. Circle the drain a little bit, and get them to kind of say, well, who is this person who is this man stalking me? And then
we have done interviews at this tech conference. Infotech is the name of it. And we have done tech kind of pro bono podcast work. We call it bonus content for the conference. By the way, great way to pitch your podcasting inside a conference is to say, hey, and I'll give you the files and you can use them as bonus content, right? Because you're in the midst of mixing these files from New Media Expo, and they're going to go out in that feed, or they're going to go out for the folks who bought the virtual ticket. Well, make it bonus content, right? Let the conference send your stuff out as well, and you can get exposure that way. So third year of the conference, and it's just starting to click right now. Like, people are recognizing us now, and they're like, oh, some of the guests have this has been their second or third time that they've been interviewed, and they're looking forward to it now, and they start contacting me. Hey, I'm going to be at Infotech. Can I, will you interview me? So, and then I picked up two brand new guests from those 16 interviews that I did. I have two new interesting guests that'll add to my show. So I think there's a lot of benefit in that if you can, and that's a local market. It's across the street from where I work. I mean, I didn't have to go to a conference. I just drove across the street. Surprisingly, it's $8 to drive across the street and park in their parking lots as opposed to parking in mine. But another alternative you might want to think about is tracking down those conferences and see if you can become bonus content for the conference. Looks like we have a call.
We actually have two. So ending in 7825, you're on with Dave and Jim. What's your name and what's your question? Oh, it would help if I.
How are you doing there, Dave and Jim?
How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Did you get that email I sent you? And I'm ready for any kind of opinion. I don't know if you opened it up and looked at it or not.
Jim, did you look at it? My problem. Here's my week. Thursday I was teaching in Toledo. I drove home. Got on the Podcasters Roundtable. Should have gone home and gone to bed, but didn't. I got like an hour and a half of sleep, and then taught a class to people in the Netherlands for my day job from 3:30 in the morning to 11 o'clock Friday morning. So my weekend started at 11 a.m. on Friday. The bad news is I've been up since 3:30, so my weekend's been a little weird. But Jim, did you get a chance to listen to it?
Yeah, Michael. So I started listening to it, and then and I got into about a minute into it, and then I stopped because something came up here. I tell you what, man, if you're going to be around, you're on the road right now, right? When are you back?
Yeah, I come back. I'll be back Sunday night, Monday, somewhere in there.
Sure. So. But give me today. I'll take a listen to that audio, and then I'll give you some feedback, and we'll do that privately.
Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, I had when I was. Dave, I'll tell you, every time something happens, like you guys did this morning with your stuff going wrong, the same thing happened to me before this thing happened. And my internet went out. I got it straightened. I didn't set up this voicemail thing, so I couldn't get that voicemail thing. And then my regular home phone that I got set up, it wouldn't work. Then the internet went down again. And then all this, I was pulling my hair out. And then I went to say, I better set up another email for blah, blah, blah. Well, now all my emails screwed up. I couldn't get any email in or out. I had to go into Google and kind of get my Gmail. It was like 2 hours of just pulling my hair out, and I was listening to you guys, and I'm like, yeah, I've been there. I got that T-shirt,
Yeah,
anyway,
being somebody that teaches, computers every day, I have learned to just roll with the punches. I showed up this week with a laptop with Office 2013 teaching a class 2010. I was just like, hey, guess what? My screen's going to look different than yours. Mine's ugly and yours isn't. So let's go. You just kind of like, you deal with it and keep rolling. So,
but I think
Michael,
with that little thing I did, I think I'm going to have to kind of like what you were doing with Brian with Profit Cash. You're saying he's really good at getting his clamor message across. He's really good at getting that. And that's one thing I think I got to work on, getting my point across in that little clamor thing, that little, 17 seconds or something or whatever,
18. Yeah. It's
elevators.
That's always something that there's a great book. I forget the name of it. I will send it to you later and I'll put a link in the show notes. That from the guy that Michael Hyatt runs, the one, I'm just the king of this, the thing of that sounds like the maybe, but there's a book and the whole thing was start off with like, what's the main point that I want to make? And then you come up with, here's my supporting argument for, why or how or things like that. You just work your way out. And I did that for my speech at Podcast Movement. And if you really boil it down to the one sentence that this episode is about, or this segment is about, it really gets you focused. And then you start thinking, okay, well, I started talking about this. Does this reinforce the original point, or does this add additional content to that? Then it's welcome to the party. It's making great content is it's always fun to shape and try, and you get better as you go.
And Michael, if I were to give you, I know you pretty well now because we've met in the local users group and stuff, and I think I can say this and not hurt your feelings. You got an ADHD podcast, and so by nature it wanders. The topic could wander a little bit, right? It's that we all snicker and laugh, but I think you'll be better served early on by really writing out your thoughts and making sure that you know where you want to go so you don't go off track. Because when you're recording, you have a tendency to jam about 3 or 4 thoughts together in a single segment because one thing leads to another for you, and you need a little bit of discipline in staying on point. And then moving on to that next thing, and that's okay. So, I might practice a little bit, and when I mean writing it out, I don't mean making a script. I just mean having an outline that you want to follow, and then working hard on sticking to that, so that you go one point, and then the second point, and then the third point. So that if I were to give you advice, which I think is what you're looking for on this, that might be a technique that you can implement to kind of help keep you on track, because you just naturally wander a little bit when you're talking. And you asked me one question, but like seven
a bullet
questions
point
coming
type
up.
thing, like 10 things I want to say, and then just never get off that.
Yeah, well, you'll start a question with me, and it'll be one question, but there'll be 10 in there before we get to the end, and it's like, whoa, let's handle the first one first, right? Let's stay on track, right? But we can laugh about it because it's ADHD, right? And that's maybe not a good reason to laugh, but we understand why why that happens. But physically writing that out might help you out.
Yeah, that's
okay.
And realize that you don't have to release everything you record. You can always record that, and it's like I said, the first episode that I'm doing for this new podcast, I'm probably not going to use the very first episode because it's a top 50 countdown. The book I was talking about is Secrets of Dynamic Communications. Prepare with focus, prepare with focus, deliver with clarity, and speak with power. It's by Ken Davis, and it's a really great book, and it's a cool way to I use that now every time I do a presentation. Someplace like I'm speaking at Podcast Movement, so I'll be digging out that book. So awesome, Michael. Thanks so much, buddy. Have a good weekend.
Okay, thanks for calling in, Michael.
Appreciate what you fellas do.
All right, thank you.
We'll see you.
Yeah. We should definitely give him a thanks up because he gave us a review on iTunes.
Woohoo.
So thank you for that, Michael. And ending in 6155, saying thanks for holding. You're on with Dave and Jim. What's your name and what's your question?
You were in Toledo and you did not call me Dave Jackson.
I know. I'm sorry, buddy. Well,
Unbelievable.
Here's the fun part of it. I'm working. We had somebody spit out a kid 2 months before she was supposed to, so we weren't really ready to have her replacement in, and then somebody else broke their ankle, I think, or something. There's something else that we're down yet another instructor, and so they said, be sure to check your schedule a lot because things are going to be changing. So I went to dinner Wednesday with my wife and was sitting down watching TV, and I pull up my iPad. I'm like, oh crap, I'm teaching in Toledo tomorrow. So I bolt out the door and here's your hotel thing. And I'm like, I missed that email. So yeah, I got there late, did my class, and then left because I had to get home and get back to the podcaster studio. So, and I didn't really get a lunch. I was actually going to call you because I thought we could hit Frickers again. This is the one, the only Nick Suberling folks from Podcasters Group Therapy and Inside the Jungle and SBNT.TV. So I know
you got them all, man.
I was gonna like, oh, if I say this publicly, Nick's gonna be mad. So my apologies, buddy.
It's all right. I totally understand. I mean, it's a cramped day. I totally understand. I need to thank you both. First, Dave, I want to thank you for putting Ben, my son, on School of Podcasting last week. He was absolutely amazed. And the Cats in the Cradle was, dude, you should start a comedy podcast. What are you doing?
Well, to me, number one, like, give us a little behind the scenes of that. Like, what's it like? How old's your son? I'm going to guess 7, maybe less.
He will be 7. Yeah, you're spot on. He will be 7 in July. So when we recorded that podcast, the first episode was on Father's Day, 2011, I believe. He was 3, and he turned 4 through the 7 episodes that we did. So he was a real young kid. He didn't say podcast. He called it a pond cast, like a pond that you swim in. And he would see me on the microphone doing my shows and wanted to be a part of it. And then, believe it or not, he actually quit on me. So once we got to episode 7, he was done. He didn't want to do it anymore. So.
The dreaded episode 7.
Yeah. But it wasn't me. That was all him.
That's
right.
I
wasn't going to force him. I mean, he was 4. So, but yeah, it was a fun little project, and he enjoyed it. And they got a kick out of hearing it this week on SOP. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I was just, like I said, I was at your website. I'm like, what is this? And I clicked on it. I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So
it was a lot of fun. And I got to give Jim Collison a huge thank you as well. Jim, if you ever listen to Dave Ramsey, he does, what do they call it? Debt-free scream.
Yeah.
I'm going to do I'm a video podcaster scream. It finally happened. And all because of Jim. Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it.
You bet, Nick. It was fun.
Yeah, I saw on Google Plus. You found the magic of PowerPress channels, and that does make life a whole lot easier. Where are you hosting your video?
I had no idea. Mediafire.com. Thanks to Jim's advice.
There you go.
I did have a question about, and maybe it was just the time that I was uploading the files, Jim, but it seemed it took then again, I'm also used to only uploading like 30 megabyte files. So now that I'm uploading a couple hundred megs, it just seemed like it took an awful long time to get uploaded. Is this a Mediafire thing, or is this just the fact that these are bigger files?
It's a bigger file, and it's a Mediafire thing. They're not the fastest. They're not lightning fast speed to get that stuff up there. So usually in my workflow, when I'm doing that, I create the videos, I make a master video, I kick them out through Handbrake. That's just my workflow. You can do it any way you want. And then I drag and drop those things into the browser and just leave them. And then I go do other things while they're uploading. YouTube is the same way, by the way. If you're uploading to YouTube, man, that upload to YouTube takes a month. It's forever. So it's just it's kind of the nature of the beast. So it's one of those things that build it into your workflow early, do a whole bunch of other things while you're waiting for that to upload, grab that, then post it. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It was just, I couldn't tell if it was something that was happening maybe with my bandwidth here on my end,
No.
And again,
It's
like
them.
I said,
It's
it's the
them
first
for
time
sure.
I've uploaded
Yeah.
massive files like that. So I'm so
No.
used to uploading 30 megs and
Yep.
being
The
done.
most
in,
common feedback
you know,
I
couple
get
minutes.
from people when I refer them or when I say I use MediaFire and they start using them is slowness of it. That's the most common. Like, and the desktop client has some restrictions, and I use the web client. I use it for one thing, right? I just get that file there, and then I go over and grab the MP3 direct link, and it works. If for what I'm using it for, it works great, right? Then I always get the edge case folks who come in and they're like, well, I tried to upload 5,000 pictures and it didn't take them all. And it's like, well, it's because HTML5 has a restriction built into it on how many files you can move, across the web. And so in this use case, I think it works great. So no, I don't think it's you. I'm pretty sure it's them. That sounds like I just broke up with you, Nick. But
No. That's really
so
funny.
anyway, yeah.
But thank you for your help, Jim. That was super helpful. And I'm so embarrassed that I didn't understand podcast channels. And really, it was just so easy. And I can't thank you enough for your help.
Here's my tip on that. You can go into the channel and color code it, because otherwise you will post it in the wrong spot. Like I accidentally sent a Ask the Podcast Coach episode down the School of Podcasting, because for a while I hosted, the RSS feed was on the School of Podcasting website. So you can go in and make it something like blue or bright yellow, so you can easily see which channel is which, and you don't accidentally post that in the wrong one.
Yeah, that's the hard part with channel podcasting, is it adds all your channels to the post when you're going into, and so like I have 3 different channels in there, and I have large and small video for each channel. So when I'm going into the post itself, each one of those channels is listed out there. So I'm really, really careful to make sure I'm getting the right video for the right channel in the right size. And you're pasting that in because they all look the same, when you're in WordPress doing those. So a little bit of a challenge there, but Nick, you're right. Channels are not difficult to understand. They're basically categories that are just a little bit, the setup is exactly the same as your categories, and channels are slick. I mean, I just really like them. So once I walked you through it, you're like, oh yeah, this isn't that hard. So if you're thinking about doing anything other than audio, channels are perfect for video feeds. And I think that's the recommended way to go on Blueberry for sure.
Yeah, I know.
PowerPress, sorry.
Yeah, Mike Dell has said that categories are left over from PodPress.
Right.
And so he's kind of like, go to channels. What size video are you using? Is it 1028 by 720? Or are you doing something more geared towards the phone, or?
I created 2 video streams, one for a 960 by 540 screen size, and another, I think the built-in setting on Premiere Pro was just 480p.
Okay.
Which seemed to be smaller. So those are the only 2 that I've really experimented with. So
because the other thing you can,
although go
ahead.
The file sizes weren't that much different, to be honest. So maybe I did something wrong.
Because what some people will do is you can go into PowerPress and give yourself the ability to turn on and off the player on a per episode basis. And so what you can do is put it in the channel box, so it's in your RSS feed, but say don't show the player, and instead put your YouTube video.
Does that sound familiar, Nick? I think I said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Is there like an echo
here?
from last night?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but that's the point. I mean, it's really good that way. It works well. Then you're using YouTube's bandwidth for the casual person who's coming by on the post, but your RSS folks are being pulled from wherever your host provider is.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I mean, that was all I wanted to call in and say thanks to both of you, and really love what you guys do with this show, and it's a lot of fun. You guys are the best.
Oh,
very cool.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Nick. It was great
Have a
talking
good
to you
weekend.
last night.
Enjoy your weekend.
Yep, we'll see you.
Dave, I'm not gonna lie. I really liked talking to Nick last night. We just did a one-on-one. That was kind of the nice, spent about a half an hour, and I just kind of explained channels to him, and he was like, "Oh, that's so easy." And again, we're talking about PowerPress, right? The plugin inside for podcasters. If you're not aware of it, so
one of the things I like about podcasting is typically your audience, if they like you, is probably kind of like you.
Yeah.
And I have yet to meet like, hey, Dave, I love your show. And then I'm like, oh, I hate that guy. Or man, that girl's an idiot. Or it's like usually people that like you are kind of like you, and they're Nick and Corey
birds of a feather, right?
Yeah,
you start attracting those.
And it seems like we're all a little smart alecky and
a little snarky.
Little snarkyism, and then you got people like Ken Blanchard that's always just making me howl laughing. So yeah.
Mike Phillips says in the chat room, he says, Jim, there's no one like you. So, and he's probably right. I'm a little crazy from that standpoint. Mike asked a good question earlier in chat. I want to cover real quick as we're going to go a few minutes over because we started a few minutes late.
Right.
He had talked about one streaming service. So we're talking about Blog Talk Radio. We're talking about Spreaker. We're talking about Mixler. We're talking about, those providers. Mm-hmm. If you were to have to pick one of those, which one would you pick? If you were on a desert island, you could only have one streaming provider, Dave, right now, which one would you pick?
Spreaker.
And
here's why. Here's why. Mixler is great. Love their chat, but all they do is stream. Spreaker, I can stream, and I've got an RSS feed that's, custom. I can send it into iTunes. I've got download stats. I just do a little more. I don't like their chat as much, but in terms of more function, more bang for the buck, I'd have to go Spreaker. What were my other options? Mixler, Spreaker, or
Blog Talk Radio is another one because they've got those features too, right there. They'll stream and they have a chat room. And,
see that's the one I was thinking. I'm like, do I need a phone? If I need a phone, in about 6 to 8 months, whenever they roll out whenever they get out of beta, Blog Talk Radio. And if budget is not a concern, that's gonna be a tough call there. When they come out of beta, that's gonna be especially if they have a different way. Like if they have a way to say it's X amount of money just for our technology, and if you want the added because part of what you're paying is they promote you on their actual website. I would love to have a package where I don't want that. I would rather go $20 a month. And I'll promote me. I don't want them to pay you to people on your website. I'm like, no, thank you. I don't need that.
Yeah. It's tough. I said I don't want to live in a world where I only get to pick one. I like to use them all, and I do use them all. We do stream out. You can stream Mixler and Spreaker at the same time. Mixler does have you can publish the show reel, right? So you can take your live stuff and publish it on Mixler. The technology is when you're recording a Mixler thing, it's recording locally, right? It's and then when you're done, it asks you the question, do you want to push this to your show reel? And if you say yes, it'll upload it to Mixler, and then you can use that as a recorded podcast there. It's not great to load the edited ones in, and I don't think the discovery on Mixler is as good. The quality's better. Mixler has the best audio quality, I think, out of all three across the board. Spreaker's catching up pretty fast here with that. You're right. Spreaker, though, has got really good community. Rob Greenlee's over there now, so I think it's going to get even better.
Check this out.
Yeah.
If you go to davidjackson.org, I did this last night when I should have been editing files for DVD Expo, but I needed a break.
Yeah.
I looked at an episode of Ask the Podcast Coach. SoundCloud brought in 1% of the audience for that episode. Spreaker brought in 22%. And I don't promote it at all. That's just that community over there. Stitcher was something like, I forget, and I can't pull up my website or it'll.
I'd say 3 to 5% probably if based on the numbers that I look at from a Mixler standpoint. But we did, Dave. Yesterday I was doing a live podcast at work and I had some problems with YouTube, and so we ended up going audio only. I used Zoom as the video recorder, which is a great backup, by the way, if you're having trouble with YouTube or Google Hangouts. Zoom.us. We've talked about them before.
Love it.
But we went to them and I did it that way. But Mixler, by far, as we were, folks jumping on Mixler, I have the Mixler player on our site, and that's everybody jumped into that one. And we've done that here too. And I think that's the preferred pre-show stuff. So Mixler kind of wins. I think wins in quality. Spreaker wins in functionality and in community from that standpoint. Blog Talk Radio, I think the verdict is still out on the changes they're making, right? And so they're making an earnest run at this thing. And I think there's some, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think there's some exciting things coming from Blog Talk Radio that will make them better for us.
When we tested that co-host thing, that was amazing. The sound quality when you and I connected.
Right.
That was really, really cool. And
Well, and there's some Google Hangouts changes coming too. You can kind of see it if you listen carefully when we're doing these Hangouts. The quality when you are off air and the quality when you are just doing a group Hangout is getting better and better and better. And it's getting better in increments. And I think Google is testing some new algorithms, some new things with audio to get better quality. I'm fairly convinced in the next year we're going to get really good, that studio kind of quality in just a regular Hangout. I'm pretty sure that's coming.
Nice.
And so even Google Hangouts are kind of picking up when we talk about that.
Yeah, here's the stat. 67% of our audience comes from our, askthepodcastcoach.com. I'm using Libsyn for this show. Of course, get a free month of Libsyn using the coupon code SOP free. 22% from Spreaker, 10% from Stitcher, 1% from SoundCloud. Now, of that, it was interesting that if you break out the Spreaker, where is my stats? It's like oh, doggone it. But like 7% of that is live. Like of the 22% of Spreaker, that audience, 7% of that is listening right now. And then the rest is, 15% later. If I added YouTube to that, YouTube is actually like another 20% of the audience. And then the 52% is from the website, 22% from YouTube, 17% from Spreaker, 8% on Stitcher, and again, 0.008% on SoundCloud. So it's interesting. I didn't think that many people were watching it on YouTube, but usually what I do is on Ask the Podcast Coach, I'll put the video on top and the audio on the bottom. And I guess if somebody's on the website, the other interesting stat is it's interesting with Stitcher. You can see how long they listened, and like 58% of the audience didn't make it all the way through, but the average listening time was like 53 minutes. So apparently that last 7 minutes they just couldn't take. Where on YouTube, only the average watching time was 27 minutes. So the audio people were listening longer. And I think that just goes back to the fact that you can listen to the show while you're, doing the dishes and mowing the lawn and things like that. Where if it's video, you probably got to go somewhere or whatever, depending on what you're doing. But so I dug through some stats just to see how that was going, and thought it was kind of interesting. 7% of the audience is live. So. Yeah.
It's good. It's good to know, to check those from time to time, say where it's going. I really think, and I said this in the chat room to Mike, is that I like to use them all, and you get what you pay for and you get what you work. So if you work the channel, I think you could be very successful on SoundCloud, Dave, if you advertised it. I think any of those, and what's crazy is I'm watching my numbers rise on services like Shout Engine and AudioMac, right? Two we never talk about. They don't show up on anybody's radar. They get very little promotion. They're really, a music service that are embracing podcasters now. And it's just been an experiment. I've thrown it out there and I get a handful of listens out there and I tweet about them and stuff like that. But I was in that same position with Podomatic, 2 years ago. I was getting nothing. And now I'm almost maxing out the free plan. I'm getting 150 to 200 listens out there on Podomatic doing nothing. So I'm like, yes, I could leave Podomatic on just sheer principle, like, oh, it's another place to be. But you know what? 150 people are listening to me out there. Right. I plan to build those other channels to that same kind of listening numbers. You add a few of those together, you string 5 channels that have 200 each listening to, and you guess what? You got 1,000 listeners, right? I mean, so
are there any kind of stats at Podomatic to show you like how that is it all?
I don't think I get them because I'm on the free plan.
Free plan, that's what I figured.
And I don't. Yeah,
love to see how that's being consumed.
It's just amazing to me. I go out there and I thought, well, maybe it was a blip, but every week it's the same thing: 150 listens, 150 listens, 150 listens, and so you're like, yeah, that's exactly my thought too. Wow, right? I was kind of shocked by it, but because I had done everything I could to not promote Podomatic. I mean, I dropped them off the radar. I'd stopped loading shows. I had stopped doing stuff, and I continue to rise in their stats. And I may get to a point where if I'm going to stay there, I might have to buy the next plan up to keep the listeners there, or at least keep some of them, so I don't lose them due to the bandwidth restrictions. So, more and more of
these platforms are starting to build their own app. Podbean has an app.
Podomatic just has a brand new app. They just released one this week.
Yeah, so they're making their directory, and I think again that's why some of these platforms are adding other people's shows that aren't using their service to their platform, so that if somebody's on Podomatic and they want to listen to Adam Carolla, they can. And as long as you don't mess with somebody's show, that way Adam still gets to put all his advertisements in and things like that, and they don't add advertising against it that Adam gets no money for. That would be bad. I think he's okay with that. So it's less bandwidth for him that he has to pay for.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it is. Spreaker's had their own app. I don't like it. I'd like them to do more of a subscription type app as opposed to a discovery kind of app, and they've kind of focused on recording live. So their iPhone and Android app is kind of a jumbled mess at this point. I'm not comfortable enough to tell my listeners, oh, just go to Spreaker and you can intuitively find my podcast. That's still really, really difficult. I'm really hoping Beyond Pod comes to subscribe on Android here quickly, because that, for me, that's the easiest, best. That's the one I like. There's another one, Dogcatcher, and then Pocket Casts. Those would be the three I think are probably the best on Android. But for my folks, I'm going to say as soon as Beyond Pod shows up on subscribe on Android, I will say, click this feed, go to Beyond Pod, choose me as search for Called to Coach or Theme Thursday or Home Gadget Geeks and subscribe, and boom, they're in. I mean, it's set up like that. I set somebody up on Beyond Pod on Android over a Skype connection, and they were in Australia, and we did that in 2 minutes. So it's easy. You can do that on Android.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And with subscribe on Android coming and getting more traction, I was happy to see that they got a couple new, and I think you mentioned this on School Podcasting. I was happy to see some new entries into that. So if you're a podcaster, you should be paying attention to subscribe on Android. And that is that we all need to get that and make it work. And it needs to be about 4 button pushes to get subscribed. And because on iTunes, it's 3. It's super easy.
Yeah.
Right. We've got to get an Android solution that works like iTunes.
I miss the days when it was 1. Apple at one point, it was subscribe, boom, subscribe. And I'm like, and then they're like, no, we got to make you go to the web, and then you click there, and they're like, oh, thank you.
It's still
Apple.
It's still pretty easy though. It's still pretty easy. Yeah.
Much easier than you used to go in and have to tell people right click on the RSS feed, copy it, go into iTunes, go into advanced, go into subscribe. It's like trying to talk somebody
on Android. Yeah, on Android it's horrible. I mean, it is just awful to try and get something subscribed to on it. I don't know how people even do it. Today I'm like, somebody's like, hey, I subscribed to you, and I'm like, can you tell me how you did it? Because it's a miracle.
Well, first we did.
It's a miracle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
I know, it's just insane. They got to stand on one foot and tap their head, and rub their belly, and then subscribe on the phone somehow. With anyways.
Yeah, it's always fun. But hey, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Again, appreciate everybody putting up with our tardiness today. The bad news is I am gonna be out of town next week. I'm like, so I got to nail these files and get them out of the way. Because it is going to take time to, in theory, I should be able to plug in the machine, load Chrome, and be good to go next week. I don't have to go, all the recording stuff is over on the Mac at this point, and my recorder here. So hopefully we won't have that problem next week. Next week it'll be like, oh, wait, I need to install Google Voice. Oh, wait, I need to install, wait, this isn't there. Oh, it doesn't recognize my camera.
It should go pretty fast.
And, of course, it has my new best friend, I'm sure I will love to death, Windows 8.
Listen,
on the machine.
You know a Windows MVP expert, right? You know one of those guys. So if you have any trouble, call him. I know how to make Windows 8.1 look like Windows 7 fairly easily.
There you go.
Don't panic. You know an MVP.
I might be calling you. That'd be fun. So, as always, Jim, where can people find you?
Average Guy. Oh, theaverageguy.tv.
Yes, you can find me at schoolofpodcasting.com. You can find, I should mention, use the coupon code ASK20 and save $20 off your first month at the School of Podcasting. And you can find us here every Saturday, askthepodcastcoach.com/live, more or less around 10:30. And give or take 5 or 10 minutes.
5 or 10 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, we'll be on time next week. So thanks so much for tuning in. And Jim, are we hanging around a little bit? I got a little bit.
Yeah, I'll hang around a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, you bet.
And as always, thanks so much for tuning in and tuning in. We'll see you again next week. Take care. And we're done. See, I'm getting smart to leave that.
Give a little break. Hey, last week in the files I sent to you from last week, there was actually some really good stuff in the post show. So have a listen to the post show as well. We may be getting to a spot where we could release just a post show at this point. Maybe put an extra show in the feed. I know you need that, like you need extra work right now, like you need a hole in your head, but. It's one of those things that it really shouldn't be that hard. But, when you run into things where, or people go, like the woman that was talking away from the microphone, she's like, yeah, my name is Lali. I'm like, what is that? I'm slowing it down. I'm like, Amy Merler, Lami, what? So I finally just put, woman away from microphone is the name of the file. I'm like, all right, we'll figure that out later. And then, the person before, because usually if you can find one, you go, oh, that's that room on this day. I'll look at the schedule. And the person before then they didn't introduce themselves. I'm like, it's just making this much harder than it needs to be. But there are some really, like I was listening to Andy Toe, the guy from Blog Talk Radio. He's all on content, and it's funny because I'm listening to them while I'm editing them and levelating them and things like that. So I haven't listened to a single session all the way through yet, but I've heard bits and pieces that I'm like, ooh, definitely want to go back and listen to that. How many total?
Over 100. Yeah.
Wow. I just got done doing 16 of those, and that was a chore. So 100, man, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, and then it's a matter of what I'm doing is, I keep the original file, and then I'll go in and I'll say, okay, here's session 1, copy it, name it, paste it. It's in the edited folder. And then, do the same thing. And then I take the edited folder, run it through Levelator, and throw it in the finished folder where it then waits for me to go and add ID3 tags. So it's like, it's not hard. It's just incredibly mind-numbingly,
Yeah. And I always hate those processes that have a bunch of steps and they're all the same, because you do the first 5 really well because you're thinking about it, and then your brain goes numb and you start skipping things and missing things, and then you have to go back and check. You're like, did I get that? Did I not? And you're like, crap, I missed it. So Well, I had yesterday, we were doing this podcast yesterday, and Google Hangouts had trouble, and I kicked over to Zoom. What I didn't get kicked over was my microphone. So it was coming, Zoom picked up the microphone off the camera and not here. So now, fortunately, the guests were on their microphones, so that's fine. And I just do a little 1-minute intro. So you only have this crappy room sounding audio for about a minute, and then they go into the guests and they're fine. But it's one of those things that, you're like, man, I've done 500 of these and I still miss, it to get, and I was, the deal, you got all this stuff going on. I got a guest waiting. We got people live waiting for us. It was just like this morning, you got people live waiting for us. Things are not working. I'm like, we're going to go audio only. I'm going to record this on Zoom. That Zoom service, we have the free plan. So it's only a 40-minute, you only get 40 minutes of audio or video. So right in the middle, 10 minutes before the program ends, Zoom says, you've got 10 minutes left. And the guest, of course, instead of just rolling through it, goes, Jim, it says here, and you're like, no. Pay no
attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yes, we don't need you to announce, But anyway, so you're like, So yesterday was not my best. Was not my best podcasting day of all time. It was like, oh man, how many of these things have I done? And I'm still a rookie.
I love like the Brady Bunch effect that you get going when you have multiple people with cameras.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool because that's what I use for the School of Podcasting after hours. So
Yeah. No, it's cool. It's a cool service. And I think $5 if you want to take off the 40-minute limit. Although for podcasting, especially what we do, 40 is what we try to hold to.
right.
So that's not a bad, I think with this guest yesterday, we would have talked well into the 50-minute mark if we hadn't had that restriction. And so it was probably better that, which got me thinking that this is hard to do without showing it, but I should do every show with a timer. That,
Yeah.
That the guests
I thought
can
about
see.
that because it gives you that sense of urgency. And I think it'd be better to have a countdown timer than a count up.
Right.
So you kind of see, I got 10 minutes.
So like American football versus soccer, right? That's in America, we count down. In soccer, they count up. I never really understood that whole. And then sometimes, like if you ever watched a real soccer game, there is no like end of the game. The ref just decides time's up.
We're done.
We're done playing. And so the clock in the stadium means nothing. It means nothing to anybody. And I was like, so how does this work? We're so used to, with American sports being so regimented and defined on what things are. And in soccer, it's just a little more open for debate.
Probably why there's more people punching each other in the stands.
Well, I saw this funny video this week. It was a soccer game, and the guy comes by and just flicks the dude in the ear. All he does is flick him. One finger flick, and the guy grabs his ear and falls down and is like shaking violently like he'd been punched, kind of thing. And it was just one of those deals where you realize, it's become that in international soccer. It has become all about the faking of the injury for the yellow card. So
interesting.
It's funny.
It's
funny.
Awesome.
Mike Howard says in chat, I just watch the clock and keep it to the hour unless the guest's on a roll. So yeah, that's the same thing I do. We start at 8 p.m. and so I look for 9 o'clock to roll around, and then we go a few minutes after. So that's kind of one way of doing it. And I don't need, like on our tech shows, I don't need a hold to a time because I don't care. It's my show. I can do whatever I want. Right. But with the Gallup podcast, they have asked me to keep those to 45 minutes. That's kind of what we decided on from a company standpoint. Keep them to 45, Jim. So that's what we work on.
Speaking of the magic word of Gallup, I know I've talked about this in the past, and I'm not going to do it anytime soon, but I do want to do it. The Strengths Finder, if I want to go through that. Yeah,
Gallup Strength Center, all one word. Gallup with a U, GALLUP. Strengths with an S, STRENGTHS, center, CENTER.com. You can buy the code for $10 and it's $9.99, I think.
Got it. Okay.
Although, I should just ship you a book, Dave. I get an extra book. Don't do that. But that's, if anybody else wants to take that, I'll send me your mailing address. But if anybody else wants to take the Strengths Finder, that's how you do it.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where I'm reading all sorts of books. I'm trying to read books on content and storytelling and blah, blah, blah. And they're always like, you need to know what your strengths are. And I'm like, I got a guy that mentioned that a while back. And I'm like,
yeah, well, Strengths Finder doesn't tell you what you're good at. It just tells you how you're going to do whatever you're doing. So, in other words, like I'm an arranger, right? That's my number one. And that I like to throw parties and put things together. And I like to take lots of things that are out there and pull them together and make something out of them. That's kind of the arranger theme. And so that's podcasting plays into that. I got to get guests. Sure. I got to create, we create, weekly shows or every other week or whatever. I mean, it plays into it. And then I have one called Activator, which means I'm really good at starting things, but then I know I'm not very good. The other strengths, I'm not good at like maintaining. That's why I'm surprised I actually have a podcast that's gone 215 episodes. Cause that's like, I've never been that consistent on anything ever. But anyways, that framework allows for a discussion. And the beauty of it is for the other 13 million people who have taken that StrengthsFinder assessment, if you talk to them, you can talk to them in a common language. So once I know what your top 5 are, Dave, I can have this conversation with you around your top 5. That'll be consistent because we have a consistent lexicon, right? A consistent message, words that are consistent. And so it's not magic. It's just a system. You got to work it like any other deal. There's no Harry Potter in this thing. You just got to take the assessment and get your top 5 back. So I'll be excited. I'll get you a book and you can take it.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I should probably run. I got a meeting with Rick at 1, and I got to eat some breakfast and lunch and
It's already lunch, my friend.
Yeah. So I guess we'll be doing that. And
sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thanks to the chat room, wherever you are. I'll be glad. It's really weird doing the show without the chat room.
It is kind of.
I didn't realize how much I look at that and kind of pay attention to what's going on. It's like, what are they talking about me?
You know what I find? So just a quick little feedback. Without the chat room, you talk a little bit longer because you don't get distracted by the chat room. So you go a little bit longer on topics because you're really thinking them through and not being distracted by them. So
is this your way of telling me to shut up?
No, I'm just saying you talk a little bit longer.
I'm just kidding.
Just an observation.
Right.
So,
Awesome.
All right, man. Have a good weekend. See you next week.
Later.
All right.